Welcome back to MeviHub.com. Hey there, MeviHub fam. It's great to see you again. In today's video, we're diving into two super important concepts in Codesys that you need to know: retained variables and persistent variables. If you've ever been confused about why some variables reset while others don't, or you just want to understand how to maintain data across resets, this video is for you. So, grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. What are retained and persistent variables? All right, before we jump into the project, let's break this down. In Codesys, we have two methods for retaining variables: one, retain; two, persistent retain. Now, they might sound similar, but trust me, they're very different, and understanding these differences is key to making your PLC programs robust. Understanding retained variables. First up, let's talk about retained variables. So what exactly is a retained variable? In Codesys, a retained variable is designed to keep its value during something called a warm reset. Now you might be asking, what's a warm reset? And what about a cold reset? Let me explain. Warm reset. This happens when the PLC restarts but doesn't lose power. Cold reset. This happens when the PLC is completely powered off and turned back on. Basically, it starts from scratch. Here's how you declare a retained variable. In this example, retain1 is an integer variable. If the PLC restarts with a warm reset, retain1 will keep its value. Cool, right? But here's the catch. During a cold reset, retained variables reset to their default values. This means they're awesome for temporary state retention, but not so great for long-term storage. Understanding persistent variables. When you declare a variable as persistent, it retains its value even after both warm and cold resets. Yup, you heard that right. No matter what kind of reset happens, the data sticks around. Here's how you declare persistent variables. In this example, persist1, persist2, and persist3 are persistent variables. These are perfect for storing critical data, like configuration settings or historical records, that you absolutely cannot afford to lose. Let's create a project in Codesys. Now that we understand these variables, let's put this knowledge into action. Step 1, create a new project. First, open Codesys and click on File, New Project. Second, choose Standard Project, give it a name like Retain and Persistent Variables, and select your target device. Third, click OK, and boom, you're ready to roll. Step 2, declare variables. 1, double-click on PLC PRG in the project tree. 2, in the program editor, start by declaring a retained variable. Here's the code. Step 3, test the retained variable. All right, let's test it. Add this line of code below the variable declaration. This will increment retain 1 by 1 every time the program runs. Run the program and observe the value of retain 1. Perform a warm reset by restarting the PLC without turning off the power. The value should still be there. Now let's perform a cold reset by turning off the PLC and powering it back on. This time, retain 1 resets to its default value, proof that it doesn't survive cold resets. Now, let's talk about persistent variables. These are like the VIPs of your PLC programming. They retain their values across both warm and cold resets. You declare them using the persistent keyword. Let me guide you through the process. Here's how you can declare persistent variables in Codesys. Right-click on your project application in the project tree. Select Add Object and then choose Persistent Vars. This will create a dedicated section for your persistent variables. Note: Persistent Vars Object Requirement. The Persistent Vars Object is a dedicated section that Codesys uses to manage persistent variables across warm and cold resets. When you include this object, it registers the persistent variables in a special memory area designed to survive resets. Oh, if you try to declare persistent variables only in your PLC PRG without adding this object, Codesys does not allocate the necessary memory, and the persistence functionality will not work. Why this happens? Codesys relies on the project structure to define how variables are managed during execution. The persistent vars object acts as a centralized handler for these variables. Without it, the The system doesn't know to treat your variables as persistent, and they revert to default behavior, not surviving resets. Practical implication: always include the persistent vars object if you intend to use persistent variables in your project. This is non-negotiable for ensuring the variables retain their values as expected. Failing to do so will lead to unexpected behavior, where the variables will reset along with the program. Once you've added the section, you can declare your persistent variables like this. So, what's happening here? var global persistent declares these variables as global and persistent. You can see variables like persis1 and persis2 are defined with their data types. These variables are tied to the PLC PRG program, but their scope is global, meaning any part of your project can access them. Let's test how persistent variables behave during resets. Run the program. Start by running your program. You can observe the values of persis1, persis2, and persis3 in the watch window. Perform a warm reset. Now go to the menu, select Online, Reset Warm, and observe the variables. They should retain their values. Perform a cold reset. Finally, perform a cold reset using Online, Reset Cold. Here's the magic. Persistent variables like persis1 still retain their values, while retained variables are reset to their initial state. You might be wondering, why go through the trouble of using persistent variables? Let me break it down. Data retention, critical for applications like maintaining counters, configuration settings, or other data across power cycles. Global scope, access these variables anywhere in your project. Reliability, ensure important data isn't lost even during a full power cycle. And that's how you make your variables unstoppable. That's it for today's tutorial on retain and persistent variables in Codesys. I hope this guide helps you keep your PLC programs rock solid and resilient. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more automation tips and tricks. Drop your questions or ideas for future topics in the comments below. Until next time, happy coding and keep automating.